Scientists have explored black holes, mapped galaxies, and split atoms. Nothing they have found comes close to what you are holding right now.
Not a smartphone, not a supercomputer, a newborn baby. At birth, your infant's brain contains 86 billion neurons, roughly the same number as an adult. But here's what most parents never hear. Those neurons are almost completely unconnected. Your baby arrives with the hardware already installed. What happens in the next few years is the most critical wiring project in human biology. And you are the electrician.
Today, we're going through 7 facts from infant neuroscience that will completely change how you see, respond to, and raise your child. These aren't parenting opinions. They're findings from neuroscience labs, published in peer-reviewed journals, and they apply to you starting today.
Welcome to Raised by Science, where we translate the latest research in child brain development into tools real parents can actually use. I'm going to give you 7 facts today, and I promise by fact 3, your entire perspective on your baby's behavior will have shifted. Let's get into it.
Fact 1. Your baby's brain builds 1 million new neural connections every single second. 1 million per second for the first few years of life. This is called synaptogenesis, the rapid formation of synaptic connections between neurons. At no other point in human life does the brain grow this fast. By age 2, your child's brain has twice as many synaptic connections as yours. Then, something remarkable happens. Between ages 2 and 10, the brain aggressively prunes the connections it isn't using, a process called synaptic pruning. Connections that are activated repeatedly survive and strengthen. Connections that go unused are eliminated. What this means for you, every interaction you have with your baby, every time you talk to them, respond to them, play with them, you are literally casting a vote for which neural connections survive. You are not just raising a child. You are sculpting a brain.
Fact 2. Eye contact between parent and baby synchronizes their brainwaves. This sounds almost too extraordinary to be true, but in 2017, researchers at Princeton University used EEG equipment to measure the brain activity of parents and babies simultaneously during face-to-face interaction. What they found was astonishing. When a parent and baby made eye contact and engaged in back-and-forth communication, their brainwaves literally synchronized. The same neural oscillations appeared in both brains at the same time. The researchers called this neural coupling, and it only happened during genuine, responsive interaction, not during one-sided talking, not during screen time, only during real, mutual, face-to-face engagement. The implication is profound. When you look into your baby's eyes and respond to their cues, you are not just bonding emotionally. You are creating a neurological bridge between two brains. Your nervous system is reaching into their developing brain and leaving an impression.
Fact 3. Chronic stress in infancy physically reshapes the brain's architecture. The brain has a stress response system centered on the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, what scientists call the HPA axis. When a baby experiences stress, a loud noise, hunger, pain, or the absence of a caregiver, cortisol floods the brain. Under normal circumstances, a caregiver responds, the baby is comforted, and cortisol levels return to baseline. This is healthy stress. It actually builds resilience. But when stress is chronic and unrelieved, when no one consistently responds, when the environment is chaotic or threatening, something different happens. The HPA axis calibrates itself to stay in high alert mode permanently. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, grows more reactive. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for learning and self-regulation, develops more slowly. Harvard's Center on the Developing Child calls this toxic stress, and their decades of research link it directly to difficulties with attention, learning, behavior, and physical health that persist into adulthood. This is not about perfection. You don't need to eliminate all stress from your baby's life. What the research shows is that one consistently responsive caregiver is enough to buffer even significant environmental stress. Your presence is the antidote.
Fact 4. Babies understand social dynamics before they understand language. Research from the Yale Infant Cognition Center, also known as the Baby Lab, has produced some of the most surprising findings in infant neuroscience. In one famous experiment, babies as young as 6 months old were shown puppet shows in which one character helped another climb a hill and a different character pushed the climber back down. When given a choice between the helpful puppet and the hindering puppet, babies overwhelmingly chose the helper at 6 months old, before they could walk, before they had a single word of language. Further studies showed that by 10 months, babies prefer fair distributors over unfair ones. They expect strangers to behave consistently with their previous actions. They can identify social hierarchies. What this tells us is that your baby is not a blank slate passively absorbing information. They are an active social scientist, running hypotheses about how the world works, who can be trusted, and what relationships are safe. How the adults in their environment treat each other matters just as much as how those adults treat the baby directly. Fact 5. Babies begin learning language before they are born. In a landmark study published in the journal Psychological Science, researchers examined the crying patterns of newborns from French-speaking and German-speaking families. They found that French newborns cried with a rising melodic contour, matching the prosody of French. German newborns cried with a falling contour, matching German. The babies had been hearing language in the womb from approximately the 3rd trimester and were already imitating the melody of their native language at birth through their cries, the only vocal instrument they had available. Further research confirmed that at birth, babies can distinguish their mother's voice from a stranger's voice. They respond differently to their native language versus a foreign one. The auditory cortex has been active and learning since before birth. What this means practically? Talking to your baby from pregnancy is not eccentric. It is neuroscience. And after birth, the quantity and quality of language your baby hears in the first 3 years predicts their vocabulary, reading ability, and academic performance years later with remarkable accuracy. Fact 6. Infant brains are more perceptive than adult brains in one critical way. Adults experience what psychologists call perceptual narrowing. Over time, our brains become highly efficient at processing the specific sounds, faces, and patterns that are most common in our environment, and less sensitive to ones that aren't. Babies have not yet undergone this narrowing. In the first 6 months of life, infants can discriminate between faces of all species. They can tell apart individual monkey faces, which adults cannot do. They can hear phonemic distinctions from every human language on Earth. They can detect statistical regularities in sensory input that completely escape adult notice. Psychologist Alison Gopnik describes babies as having a lantern of attention, diffuse, wide, taking in everything simultaneously. Adults have a spotlight, narrow, focused, efficient. This is why early exposure to multiple languages, diverse social environments, and rich sensory experiences has such outsized effects during infancy.
the window of maximum perceptual sensitivity is open, and it gradually closes.
Fact 7, and this one is the most important for your peace of mind as a parent. The brain is built for repair, not perfection. Ed Tronick, the Harvard researcher who conducted the famous still face experiment, followed up his work with something he called mismatch and repair research. What he found was that even in the most attuned, sensitive parent-baby relationships, interactions are mismatched, meaning the parent misreads or fails to respond to the baby's cues roughly 70% of the time. 70%. Even the best parents get it wrong most of the time. And yet their babies develop secure attachment, healthy brains, and strong emotional regulation. Why? Because it's not the mismatches that matter, it's the repairs. Every time a parent notices a disconnection and reestablishes contact, picks up the baby who was reaching out for them, responds to the cry they initially missed, apologizes to the toddler they snapped at, the baby's brain records something essential. Relationships can be broken and fixed. The world is repairable. Tronick's research shows that it is precisely this cycle of mismatch and repair, not seamless, perfect attunement, that builds the neurological capacity for emotional resilience. You don't need to be a perfect parent. You need to be a repairing one. 7 facts, 1 conclusion. The ordinary moments of early parenting, the eye contact, the conversations, the responses to crying, the repairs after difficult moments, are not small things. They are the building blocks of a human brain. Neuroscience doesn't make parenting more complicated. It makes it more meaningful. If this video gave you something useful, subscribe to Raised by Science. We publish new videos every week, breaking down the latest child brain research into things you can actually use. And share this with a new parent in your life, because this is the kind of information every parent deserves to have from day one. See you in the next one.